Hello everyone, welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we follow Tu Tien as she stays by Jack's side during one of the most difficult moments of his life. Lying in a hospital bed, Jack is not just physically exhausted, but mentally broken, lost in a place where even words feel too heavy to speak. What unfolds is not a story of sudden recovery, but of quiet patience, silent care, and the strength it takes to stay when things don't immediately get better. As Tu Tien refuses to leave and chooses to face each slow moment with him, they begin a fragile journey back from the edge. Stay with us as this emotional story unfolds. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The hospital room was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on everything. On the pale walls, on the slow blinking monitor, on the unmoving figure lying in the bed. Jack hadn't spoken much in the past few days. Even when he opened his eyes, there was a distance in them, like he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere no one could reach. Tu Tien sat beside him, her hands resting gently in her lap. She had been there since early morning, and somehow the hours had passed without her noticing. Time didn't move normally in this room. It stretched, paused, and sometimes felt like it stopped completely. She watched the faint rise and fall of Jack's chest, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing as if it were the only thing anchoring her to reality. A small container sat on the table beside her, food she had prepared at dawn before coming to the hospital. It had taken effort to cook, not because the dishes were complicated, but because her mind kept drifting back to Jack. Still, she forced herself to finish it. She told herself that even if he didn't eat, she needed to try. She opened the lid slowly, careful not to make too much noise. The familiar aroma filled the space between them, warm and comforting, almost out of place in the sterile room. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing at Jack's face. His eyes were open now, but unfocused, staring somewhere beyond the ceiling. Jack, her voice was soft, almost afraid to disturb him. "I made something for you." There was no immediate response, just the faint flicker of his eyes, shifting slightly, acknowledging her presence, but not fully returning to her. Tu Tien leaned closer, her expression gentle, but steady. "You don't have to eat much. Just a little, okay?" She picked up the spoon, letting it cool before bringing it toward him. For a second, it seemed like he wouldn't react at all. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he turned his head a fraction. It wasn't much, but to her, it felt like progress. He opened his mouth just enough for the spoon to pass. The movement was mechanical, without emotion, but it was something. Tu Tien exhaled quietly, not realizing she had been holding her breath. "That's good," she said softly, a faint smile appearing. Just like that. She continued feeding him slowly, patient with every pause, every moment where he seemed to drift away again. There was no rush. She had already decided she would match his pace, no matter how slow it was. Outside the window, the sky was a muted gray, the kind of overcast that made everything feel heavier. People passed by in the distance, their lives continuing as usual, untouched by the stillness inside this room. Tu Tien didn't look at them for long. Her world, for now, was here. After a few more bites, Jack turned his head away slightly, signaling He couldn't continue. Tu Tien didn't insist. She placed the spoon down carefully and closed the container. "That's okay," she murmured. "You did well." For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Not as heavy, not as distant. Tu Tien reached out and adjusted the blanket over him, smoothing it gently as if he might feel even the smallest discomfort. Her eyes lingered on his face. There were subtle changes, signs of exhaustion, of something deeper that words couldn't fully describe. She knew it wasn't just physical. What Jack was going through was something far more complicated, something that couldn't be fixed with medicine alone. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself," she said quietly, more to him than to the room. "I'm here." Jack's gaze shifted slightly toward her. It was faint, but this time there was something in it. A trace of awareness, maybe even a hint of emotion. She leaned back in her chair, not breaking eye contact. "You don't need to be strong all the time. Not right now." A long pause followed. Then, almost imperceptibly, his fingers moved. It was a small motion, barely noticeable, but Tu Tien saw it immediately. Without hesitation, she reached out and gently held his hand. It was colder than she expected. She tightened her grip just enough to offer warmth, her thumb brushing lightly over his skin. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can take your time." The afternoon passed slowly. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting equipment, speaking in low voices that blended into the background. Tu Tien remained in her seat, never once leaving his side. At one point, she stood up and walked to the window, stretching her legs slightly. The city outside looked unchanged. Cars moving, people talking, life continuing. It felt strange, almost unfair, how normal everything seemed out there. She turned back toward Jack. For a brief moment, she imagined what things would feel like if he wasn't here, if this room was empty. The thought hit her harder than she expected, and she quickly pushed it away. No, she wouldn't let her mind go there. Instead, she returned to her chair, sitting down with quiet determination. She adjusted his pillow, making sure he was comfortable, then reached for a damp cloth to gently wipe his hands. Each movement was careful, deliberate, filled with a kind of care that didn't need to be spoken. "Do you remember," she began softly, "how you used to tell me not to worry so much?" There was no answer, but she continued anyway. "You always said things would work out somehow, that even when things got difficult, we would find a way through." Her voice didn't waver, but there was a quiet depth to it now, something more grounded than before. "I believe that," she said, "even now." She placed the cloth aside and looked at him again, her expression calm but resolute. "So you don't have to rush, you don't have to pretend, just stay here, okay? That's enough." The room fell silent once more, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with something steady, something patient. Jack's eyes slowly closed, not in the same distant way as before, but with a hint of rest, as if for the first time in days, he felt even a small sense of relief. Tu Tien didn't move. She stayed exactly where she was, her hand still holding his, her presence unwavering. And in that quiet hospital room, where nothing seemed to change on the surface, something subtle began to shift. Slow, fragile, but real. The next morning arrived quietly, marked only by the soft glow of pale sunlight slipping through the thin hospital curtains. The light didn't feel warm, but it was enough to signal that a new day had begun. Tu Tien had barely slept. She had rested her head against the side of the bed sometime during the night, her hands still loosely holding Jack's, as if letting go, even for a moment, might cause something to break. She stirred as she felt a slight movement. At first, she thought she imagined it. But then it came again. Subtle, almost hesitant. Jack's fingers shifted weakly beneath hers. Tu Tien straightened immediately, her eyes searching his face. His eyes were open, not the distant, unfocused gaze from before, but something more present. Still tired, still heavy, but aware. "Jack," her voice was gentle, careful not to overwhelm him. "You're awake." He didn't respond right away. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. It looked like even forming words required more strength than he had. But his eyes stayed on her, and that alone was enough to make her chest tighten with quiet relief. "I'm here," she said softly, leaning closer. "I didn't go anywhere." For a moment, it seemed like he was trying to say something. His brows furrowed faintly, frustration flickering across his face. Tu Tien noticed immediately. "It's okay," she reassured him. "You don't have to talk yet." She reached for the glass of water on the table, carefully helping him sit up, just enough to take a small sip. Her movements were slow, supportive, making sure he didn't strain himself. Jack swallowed with difficulty, then leaned back against the pillow. His breathing was still uneven, but steadier than before. The silence between them returned, but it was no longer empty. There was something new in it, something that hadn't been there yesterday. Awareness, presence, a fragile connection that felt like it could grow, if given time. Tu Tien studied his face, noticing every small change. The tension in his expression hadn't disappeared, but it wasn't as overwhelming. It was as if something inside him had shifted slightly, just enough to let a small amount of light through. "You scared me," she admitted quietly, her voice steady but honest. "Not because you were here, but because you felt so far away." Jack blinked slowly, his gaze softening just a little. She continued, not rushing, choosing her words with care. "I didn't know how to reach you. I kept talking, but it felt like you couldn't hear me." A faint movement crossed his face, something close to guilt, or maybe regret. His fingers twitched again, this time more intentionally. Tu Tien noticed immediately and gently placed her hand over his again, offering warmth, grounding him. "You don't have to explain anything right now," she said. "We'll figure things out later. Right now, you just need to rest." He closed his eyes briefly, as if the effort of simply being awake was already exhausting. But this time, when he opened them again, he didn't drift away. He stayed. That alone felt like a quiet victory. A nurse entered the room not long after, performing routine checks with practiced ease. Tu Tien stepped aside slightly, but didn't move far. She watched closely, listening to every word, every small update. "He's improving," the nurse said softly, glancing at her with a reassuring smile. "It's slow, but this is a good sign." Tu Tien nodded, her expression calm, but inside, something eased. After the nurse left, she returned to her seat, her attention immediately back on Jack. "I brought some more food," she said gently. "We can try again later, when you feel ready." He didn't respond verbally, but his eyes shifted slightly toward her, acknowledging her words. The morning passed differently from the day before. Instead of long stretches of unbroken silence, there were small moments, brief eye contact, slight movements, quiet awareness. Each one felt significant. At one point, Tu Tien stood up and opened the curtain a little more, letting in additional light. The room brightened, just enough to soften the atmosphere. "Feels a bit less heavy like this," she said, half to herself. She turned back and noticed Jack watching her, not just passively, but with intention. It was the first time he had done that. She paused for a second, then smiled faintly. "What?" His lips moved again, this time forming a faint, almost inaudible sound. "Sorry." The word was barely there, fragile and quiet, but unmistakable. Tu Tien froze for a split second, surprised, not by the word itself, but by the fact that he had said anything at all. Then she shook her head gently, stepping closer. "No," she said softly. "You don't need to say that." Her voice was firm, in a way it hadn't been before. Not harsh, but certain. "You didn't do anything wrong by breaking down." Jack's eyes flickered, something deep and complicated passing through them. "You've been carrying too much," she continued. "For too long." She pulled the chair closer again and sat down, this time leaning slightly forward, her presence more grounded. "And you don't have to carry it alone anymore." The words settled into the space between them, not heavy, but steady. Jack didn't respond immediately. His gaze dropped slightly, as if he was processing something difficult, something he hadn't allowed himself to face before. For the first time, Tu Tien didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it exist, trusting that it was part of the process. A few minutes later, he shifted slightly, his hand tightening just a little around hers. It wasn't strong, but it was intentional. She felt it instantly, and this time, she didn't hide the small smile that appeared. "That's enough," she whispered. "You don't have to do more than that." Outside, the day continued as usual. The distant sounds of movement, of life going on, filtered faintly into the room. But inside, something had changed. Not everything was better, not even close. Jack was still weak, still quiet, still carrying something heavy inside him. But he was no longer unreachable, and Tu Tien was no longer just waiting for him to come back. Now they were meeting somewhere in the middle, slowly, carefully, one small moment at a time. As the afternoon light began to soften again, Tu Tien adjusted his blanket once more, her movements as gentle as ever. "We'll take it step by step," she said quietly. Jack didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. And for the first time since he had been admitted to the hospital, that felt like the beginning of something. Not an end, not a resolution, but a start. A fragile one, but real,